How are you doing, Ryan?
Yeah, pretty good. Cool. In a better mood seeing a healing this morning.
That's
really
pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's always pretty cool.
That made me. I was nervous about that because I didn't know whether it was the right thing to do or not. But then
I think healing is always the right thing.
Reassured.
Yeah, healing is always the right thing. God is good, eh? It's been amazing, actually, how many healing testimonies there's been recently.
Yeah.
I won't say the person's name because they'll share it probably on Sunday. But another person said this week they had like 2 things they were really trusting God for healing. And during time Christoph was here, they experienced healing, but they were just like testing it out. Mm-hmm. And they're like, now it's like 2 weeks or 10 days, and
that's awesome.
They're healed.
I want to see healings. I think that's always been a thing, like, because it's the clearest, most obvious evidence for me. So I'm hungry for healings. I want to see healings. I don't think there's enough hunger for healings, enough expectation for healings.
I agree with that. But I think I'm always challenged. I always wrestle with like the difference between like hunger for the things of God and hunger for God, because it's not like a direct. It's so hard to know, because I think you can just get hungry for the things of God, but so often genuine hunger for God, like in terms of wanting Him, also manifests in wanting the signs of His love and presence, because He's a good God, and so He wants to do things like heal people. Now a lot of people battle with that, because then they say, well, I didn't get my healing, or this person was never healed, or all those sorts of arguments that people make against that.
Yeah, there's one of my quotes from one of my favorite movies is that we only see the outside, but all the most important things happen on the inside. And I think to see somebody healed when you pray is an outside thing. So it's really encouraging. It builds faith because you're seeing it on the outside. It's a clear outside miracle. But from my personal experience, and I think from anybody who's been saved, anybody who's given their life, all of our testimonies are kind of the same in that like there is a healing, there is a miracle that happens in a person's heart when they give their life. And if I look at the brokenness in me and how that was healed inside, it's not something that is healable. It's not a brokenness that is healable. It is a miracle. And I think every single person has a brokenness in their heart that gets healed, and it's a miracle when they give their life. But
did your healing happen when you gave your life?
No, it took a long time.
Yeah.
But it is still a miracle. And I think it's like the biggest miracle, but it's obviously on the inside, and we only see the outside.
Yeah.
So that's also a miracle. That's also a healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's almost, I think those sorts of internal healings are more important than the physical healings, because you can have people, I think I'm just going to use this person as an example, but there's like that guy, Nick Wojcik, the guy without the arms and legs. I don't know if you've seen him. So God uses him powerfully, and he's not grown his arms and legs. I'm not saying God can't. Of course God can. I'm not saying that Nick doesn't have faith for that. My point is, his inner healing has made him powerful for God. So the inner healing is always more important. It's always the primary. Like it doesn't actually mean anything if you are healed physically, or let me not say it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something, but it's not lasting if you're healed physically, because you can resurrect the dead. They're going to die again. And unless they have Jesus, then they have eternal life. So the inner stuff is always the primary, but it is amazing how God, when people come and truly surrender and truly are like, Lord, I want you, that the result of that hunger is also physical healing.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I think why I get excited about physical healing is because it's very clear on the outside to a person who doesn't believe.
Yeah.
So it is it is a sign to a non-believer to surrender their heart. It invites a non-believer in. It's like,
Yeah.
if I can see this on the outside, then what I need on the inside is possible. And I think that's why, like, because I have such a heart for evangelism. I think it's how people, it's how I got drawn in. I think
Yeah. It also makes you wonder, like, why, like, where you've been in that situation, where you've been in contexts where the gospel is very new, or it's very, it's not a completely unreached place, but there's a lot of competition in the spiritual realm. And in that context, probably the place you've seen the most healings that you've ever experienced, which was, in a small village in Africa, literally, to to use that cliche. But I mean, so like often I think people say, well, why in those places, why in like the far-reaching places do you get miracles of the extent that like some of the things you've seen, and then why maybe in more already reached places there isn't that much? I think a lot of it's got to do with faith, expectancy, but some of it is also just like you're saying, it's a witness to the gospel. And it's also like, I think often in those places that a lot of the sickness is also demonic. I'm not saying it's not demonic in other places. I don't know. I'm rambling, I suppose, but it's people trying to make sense of this. They're trying to handle this whole thing of God's healing, God's grace, faith, how all these things work. And in the midst of that, some people don't receive healing that they maybe prayed for years.
Yeah. I've actually grappled with this a lot because it was confusing to me. Like, why is it that you go to a different country, and there's powerful manifestation of the demonic in like an African country, and powerful miracles and movement of God and Holy Spirit when people go and evangelize there, and then like for me, I'll come home and it's just like a flat line. Feels like a flat line. I'm not going to pretend I have the answer to that, but I do also, I believe, in a way it has something to do with faith. It also has to do with what we're vulnerable to in terms of attack, I think. In terms of, like, if you go to a rural area, there's a lot of superstition and there's a lot of fear around the demonic, and so you see power move there in very in your face ways because people believe in it, and something like that has power over people. But because of that, there's also a whole lot of faith in the supernatural, and there's a whole lot of faith in like miracles that can happen, and people are moved by miracles to change as well, because that's what it's the same thing they fear.
No, it is. Well, I suppose it's that dynamic in that context where if you didn't have signs, wonders, and miracles, they wouldn't believe your message.
Exactly.
Because they would be able to take you to the Sangoma who can do incredible things. And I mean, we don't have to glorify that on here but if people want to know the kind of stuff that they see on a daily basis, is most Westerners would just kind of like dismiss that to like, oh, that's like nonsense and no, and people have but like go there, ask the people, talk to the people. Like they see
ridiculous stories,
mad things on a regular basis, and it's real stuff. I mean, I think in Zambia, the one that always stood out for me the most was the witches that would be flying around at night, and then how they would sometimes, and I'm not saying why, but sometimes, and people thought it was often to do with churches where they're praying, whatever, they would crash because they would fly over where people are praying and they'd crash, and they'd literally find these people naked in the middle of the veldt.
It's so wild.
That have just crashed, but you can see them. You can see the lights.
That's so wild.
You can see them flying. Anyway, moving on from that, I think one of the things you've touched on now was like the whole thing of expectancy and atmosphere, which I think is really interesting because both those things have to do with one another. Like if I think of this 2 weeks ago with Christoph being here, why was there more activity than what we've maybe experienced before? Well, a lot of that's got to do with expectancy. So when people have expectancy for God to move, and it has to do even with the person traveling overseas, there's that faith of someone coming, like you went to a particular country and then people are like, this person's come here for us. Faith rises in that. It's out of the ordinary. And so people's faith rise. And then as well as that happens, when there's collective faith, there's a shifting in the atmosphere. Through worship, through prayer, through the preparation of hearts, something shifts in the atmosphere, which is and it's hard to say what that. I mean, I think essentially it's the manifestation of God, of His presence. I don't think that's faith, because faith is something that's here. Faith is not an atmosphere thing. So I think it's dangerous to put faith as there's an atmosphere of faith. I don't know if that's true biblically. I think faith is like something that you get here when you believe the Word of God. But there's an atmosphere that stirs faith, or I don't know if that's been your experience as well. Like,
no, yeah, definitely. I think, like, it lines up with the other side of the equation when I come back home, when I came back home, and how, so I saw these amazing signs of wonders, and I was on fire, and I came, had this new experience, and it was like crazy, and then I come home, and I feel like I'm like flying because of my faith, and within a month or two I'm right back to where I was. I'll get derailed, distracted. I'll kind of slip into bits of sin that I left and I was freed of, and I'll get just kind of distracted and numbed and inundated when I get back, because that seems to be the primary weapon in terms of more westernized or modern, like first world cultures and stuff. It's not the miracles that move people. It's like, I guess we are more of the false idol than
we make
the
ourselves
Sangoma in a first world country.
Yeah.
And I would get all wrapped up in myself over and over again, and all distracted, and stupid things, media, other people's ideas, fear of man, pride. I would just get distracted and derailed very quickly. Still fight that, and kind of derailed by the mundanity, and my faith just drops. And that was so confusing, and I feel like that's like, if the enemy is preying on our weaknesses, here our weakness is pride and idolizing other people's opinions, and our own opinions and our own agendas over God, and it just like there's no expectation, and it's almost like the dryness of our intellectual modern context just seeps in.
What do you think? I mean, I always wonder about that with like the mundane like life, because we all have to live like normal lives, and we are always on mission. We believe that's part of our belief in kingdom. We're always on mission, but it's very different, like you say, when you actually go to you were in Zim, I think, mainly.
Zim, and then Zambia, and then Eastern Cape a few times.
Yeah, so you're going to a place, like the expectation's different, the preparation's different, there's so many things, but now you come back to the normal life. How do we, in that space, continue to have expectancy, continue to be open, continue to be soft, continue to be vulnerable, continue to be hungry for God? I mean, that's my biggest thing coming out of Christoph's time with us. One of the things he said is, ask God to make you hungry. Now, one of the great ways of doing that is actually fasting. Fasting is not to try and make God do anything. Fasting is really to make you actually be more open to God and actually realize why you need to be hungry. Because, and I think that's the problem with the comforts, the self-obsession, is because everything is kind of, the way we live is kind of geared around ourselves. So we get caught up into that, And that idol and that self-obsession, then we stop being hungry. Or we're hungry for God in as much as we need him to meet a particular need or do a particular thing. But we're not actually hungry for him. We're not desperate for him. So, yeah, that is a question I often ask, coming out of times where there's been real impact. And it's like, how do we stay in a space of hunger? I think one of the answers, I'd love to hear what you think, but I think one of the answers is so much to do with community, is staying plugged into community, stay connecting more, taking more time to pray together, to worship together. Now, I'm not meaning just more meetings, just like, because you can do that and you just kill yourself. But I think a big part of breaking out of the self-obsessed and the spiral of all that stuff is when you actually come together with expectancy in a group to meet God. And you stir each other, because we're not always at the same level. Like, you may be more on fire today and I might be weak, or vice versa. And so that's my biggest thing, is like, do that more. I don't know if there's other things. I don't know if you've experienced from that.
That makes, I mean, that would probably be my answer as well, to be honest. When I looked at, like, the expectancy, that we felt called to leave. Obviously, I went with a massive, like a mentor figure who's a massive, like, has built my faith from the beginning, built me up from the beginning. And I went a few years ago, and I was actually a younger Christian, and I think I had expectation because he had expectation. But we all went out in faith, and then there's this whole process of us sitting, driving up there for 3 days, sometimes 5 days, and like out of our own comfort zones, out of our own contexts, in this foreign place where there was nothing that we knew, all of us very different, but kind of united in the fact that we had one thing in common, and that was God. And the other thing in common was that we left in service expecting a miracle, and expecting lives to change. And there would be 3 to 5 day periods of us just driving up, stoking each other's faith and excitement, because we were so decontextualized, so out of our comfort zones, with nothing to rely on except for God, and building each other up in confidence of that constantly, kind of stoking each other up. In my case, like my mentor stoking up my faith. By the time I arrived there, I was ready to see miracles, because and it was foreign. There was no comfort. So there was complete reliance on God, because there was no comfort. There was nothing around me that I could hide behind or rest in except for God. Here I can go hide away in 100 different places if I'm out of my comfort zone. There I had nothing but God and the people I was in community with, the people I went with. I didn't know anything else. I didn't have anything else.
Sure.
And that reliance on God and that reliance on the people, the community, and the stoking of each other's faith ended up, I think, changing our atmosphere going in.
So maybe that's two things in a sense, I think, that are really significant. Well, there's more than that, but the two things that I think are really significant for me, like in that experience of yours, which is the same as, like, relating it back again to, like I said, it wasn't this weekend, 2 weekends ago with Christoph, is the missional aspect. Like, you're on a mission, there's a purpose. So maybe it's 3 things: mission aspect, the complete reliance on God, like, unless that saying, I love it, unless God. Unless God. So you, like, God, you do something, because we have nothing that we can actually do for these people. We could preach nice messages and things, but essentially if it's not by the power of God, it's not going to do anything. So mission, clear mission, total reliance, and then community, the people of God. And I think those 3 things, again, like bringing it back to our own context, we can build those things. We can build a more clear sense of mission. We're called to a mission, to a region, to the people. We can build a greater sense of like, unless God, because it's not just eloquent preaching and things. And yes, we need to have systems, we need to have courses that we teach people the Bible and things. But if it's not through encounter with God, if it's not real life, then it just becomes dry, it just becomes religious. But I think the thing for me that's the key almost is, it keeps coming back. I'm not saying the others are just as important, but the key thing that is the most tangible is this thing of the people. Like the people of God. And I was thinking about that a lot lately, like just who are the people of God? Like that, just that phrase, because there's so much chatter on the internet and everywhere about the people of God, who's the people of God. And I mean, we could get into that whole topic. Maybe we will sometime actually talk just about that. But for me, what I realized about that is what defines the people of God, like really defines the people in a way that is so significant is, and you can see it through, if we looked at scripture, I could show you some scriptures, but is that the people of God are those who hear and obey his voice. Like all throughout, like in every time, it's like with Abraham, what does God say to Abraham? Because you have obeyed my voice. What does God say to Israel when he gives them the law? He says, if you will obey my voice. What does Jesus say to the Jews? He's talking to the Jews and they want to stone him because he says, you are not my sheep, because you have not heard, you don't hear my voice, and follow me. He says, hear my voice, and I think he says 3 phases, but and follow me. So, but that's significant, because if you're with people who hear the voice of God and obey it, you will learn to hear the voice of God, and you will be. It's not automatic that you're going to obey it. You may not, but you'll have inspiration, example. You'll have encouragement of testimony of obeying the voice of God, and people saying, I heard God, because that's essentially every testimony. Every testimony is, I heard God, I responded, God did this for me. And that doesn't build faith, and it's not, faith comes from hearing, but well, I suppose it does build faith in that sense, but what it does is it creates that atmosphere again, and that expectancy again. So I just feel like that thing of people, the people that we hang out with, the people we spend time with, is so significant.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes perfect. Like, even I love what you said with the like the God or else.
Yeah.
If I look at when I've been most on fire and most excited about God and like close with God, it's in context where I've stepped out of my safety into a place where it is God or else.
Yeah.
Within community, usually, where there's a collective God or else. And even if I look at throughout if you look at most of Jesus's healings, there were all these people who were in these positions of like the bleeding woman, God or else, I don't have anything else, and stepping into a context where there's no safety except for God, except for faith, putting themselves into that position, or you can look at almost all of the healings. It was like a that or nothing. There's no hope.
Yeah.
And I feel like that can happen once, in the context of like that can be a once and then never again, or we can I guess it's like, how do we keep on getting ourselves into being in that position of God or else, so that the miracle that happens in us isn't just once, I get healed, on the inside I get healed, and then cool, I'm good. And then I end up getting distracted and building reliance on other things. To stay in that place of faith, which is there is no safety net, there is no fallback. There's just God. That's all I have.
That's huge. I mean, for me, like the best example of that, and this is the example on a number of different levels, is the example of Abraham. Maybe we should look at that scripture. Let me just find it quickly. I have it here. So Genesis chapter 22. Have you got it there?
Yeah. So
It says, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham. So this is after Abraham has gone through this whole journey. The Lord has called him and said, like, leave your family, and he's gone. He's left. And God says, I'm going to make you this great nation. I'm going to give you a son. I'm going to make your descendants as many as the stars. He's given him all these things over 25 years, this journey with the Lord. He got to a point where he was like, he doesn't know if this is going to happen. God appears to him again physically, like Jesus and two angels come and eat with him. He knows it's Jesus because he says, Lord. And he says, if I now found favor. So his faith was a little bit wonky. And like a year later, he has a son. And so all of this is unfolded in his life. The very purpose for which he's made has happened by him hearing the voice of God, obeying God. Yes, his faith sometimes was up and down, and he made his own plan at one point, and all that stuff. It's all part of his journey, all of our journeys. But then his faith, Romans 4 tells us, his faith got so certain that he was like, he became so convinced. He was like, no matter what, he couldn't be shaken. But now this is when Isaac is now a boy. We don't know how old Isaac was. He could have been a man already. Some people say he was like 13, 14. Some say he might have been 30 when this happened. I don't know how Abraham at 100 would have been wrestling, or 130 then. But then God says to him, go and sacrifice your son. Okay, so I'll just read it, and then it says, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, surely I will bless you, and surely I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand is on the seashore. So it's all stuff he's already promised him, but he says, now surely I will do this, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring the nations. But here's the thing, because you have obeyed my voice. Now, but just think about that for a moment, because God's voice spoke to Abraham. Abraham had the son. Like, let's say I like to picture it maybe more like he's 9 or 10 years old. I think of my boy, he's 9 years old. You have the son that you've wanted with everything in you your whole life, and you hold him and you kiss him goodnight, and you have fun with him, and you see your life through him, and you have the son, and God speaks in his voice to you and says, go and sacrifice your son. He could have just said no. Because no one even knows. It's just God's voice to him.
to be honest, I don't think I would be.
But it's crazy. He could have just said, no, I'm going to ignore that voice. It's not God. It's whatever. But he obeyed the voice of God that was an internal voice that said to him, go and sacrifice. And Hebrews tells us he believed that God would resurrect his son. His faith was at that level now, where he was that God was going to, because he knew it was this boy, it wasn't any other boy. So he goes to sacrifice his son. And the angel says, because you have obeyed my voice. Not obeyed like a commandment, not obeyed like, it was just a voice that spoke to Abraham and said, Abraham, go and sacrifice your son. Like, how easy is it to just disregard that and just be like, I've got the blessing, I've got the thing I want, so sorry God, I can't hear you, I'm just going to live my life. But to me, that's the contrast, because that's the like difference between, do you want God for God, or do you want God for the blessing? Are you desperate to hear his voice, and so desperate and so hungry
challenging
that no matter what he says, you'll be like, that's the voice of God, I'm going to do that. That just blows my mind. It takes what we believe as Christianity and faith, it takes it to a level that I think many never walk in.
Yeah, like if I heard that, I would. If I felt in my heart that I had to do that, I would just call myself insane. I would just be like, I think I need a doctor. To get to the point where you can first of all, like, to trust the Spirit to that extent, but to even to know that it is the Spirit to that extent, that you're willing to step out like that, is challenging to me, because it's like he knew it wasn't his voice, and he was just a bit crazy. Like, he knew it was God speaking. He knew enough to go and do that. There was no. He believed that God would save his son, but also he believed that he knew that God was telling him to do that.
To do that, yeah. But this is the thing, is like we know, like if you've heard the voice of God once, okay, maybe not just once, but if you've heard the voice, if you know God has spoken, you know when God speaks. So that's the challenging thing, is like, I don't know, maybe it took him a while, maybe God had to speak a few times before he was like, is this really you, God? I mean, this is crazy. But at the end of the day, he was convinced this is God, and I have to follow through with this. But for me, what it says is, why do you do that? Why are you even open to that? Why are you even willing? Because you're hungry for the voice of God. It's like that verse, man shall not live by bread alone, but by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Now, like Jesus quotes it and says every word when he battles the devil, but in the Hebrew Bible it actually says everything. So that's like, yes, it's his word, yes, it's his spirit, yes, it's his whatever is just like, you're just so like hanging on to hear the Father speak. I think if that's our position, our posture, God will move in our midst.
Yeah.
But he may call us to do this,
yeah,
which is super
terrifying.
scary.
But also, like, I just think, like, in order for Abraham to be willing to do that, he knew who God was.
Yeah.
He understood God's character.
Yeah.
He knew God on a personal level, like enough to trust. He knew that God was good, enough to trust him enough to do something that didn't look like goodness. And that's
that's
huge.
A really good point.
Like he heard God's voice. He knew he was on a place. So he was in a place of relationship where he knew that it was God speaking, and he trusted God enough to know, like he knew God's character well enough to do something that insane and know that it was God being good.
Yeah.
And like, how do you get there?
Yeah, but that's I think that's also like really relevant to like maybe people who say, well, I've seen God do some weird stuff like over the past week or so. Like, why would God make somebody shake on the ground or fall over or whatever it is that you maybe are struggling with because you're like, that's too weird. And I mean, I can give you all the examples in the Bible of God doing stuff like that. I mean, so we could look at those examples, but that's not really the question, because it's like that doesn't convince anybody. What actually convinces you is exactly what you're saying, is whether or not you are so convinced of God's goodness that you're like, God, I'm open to you in every way. You can do in my life whatever you want, even if it means making me look like a fool, like David dancing in his underpants, or Saul lying naked, prophesying for the whole day, or the crazy things God asked the prophets to do, the crazy experiences that the Apostle Paul, and I mean, you can try and quantify each thing and be like, oh, that person shook, what was that? Or that person fell over, what's that? Or was that person pushed? Although, I mean, we obviously never try and push people over, but you could try and do that, or you could just say, is my heart open that I want God, I want it so much, I want him so much, that whatever he says I'm open to, even if it makes me look like a fool, or even if it's out of my control. In fact, it has to be out of my control for it to be God. It can't be God and in my control.
Yeah, that'd be the thing.
It's kind of like a contradiction in terms,
I guess. Yeah, then the question is, how do I get myself to the place where I trust God to such an extent that I know his voice and his character to the extent that I'm able to action out his word in faith? How do I build that? How do I get myself to the place where I'm willing to step out to that extent?
Yeah.
Where I'm, to the point of insanity, like Abraham. How do you get yourself to the point where you go, I know his character and his voice to the extent that I'm willing to do that?
Well, I mean, Abraham is like the perfect example. I think he is the perfect example because he's the father of our faith. So there's a reason he's called that, because he absolutely demonstrates faith in every step. And for him, it was a journey. I think it is a journey. I don't think anyone's going to just go from 0 to 100. Some people almost do. Some people are like fast track. They go from 0 to 100. But for most of us, I think it's like little steps of faith. So for Abraham, the first step was leave your father's house, leave your country, leave what's comfortable, and let me show you where I'm going to take you. And the evidence of that was Abraham became incredibly wealthy. He still didn't have a son, but he became incredibly wealthy and also powerful. You know, he's trained 300 trained men, defeated like whole armies. So his faithfulness to God's initial word, his voice, and he walked, there was evidence. So he saw the evidence, but the evidence didn't come until he was faithful. It's not what people want to do is they say, if God speaks, they're like, okay, God, show it to me, and then I'll do it. No, God has to speak, then you have to obey, then you see the evidence. Now, you do that over and over and over again, I think you get to the point where Abraham was. And I don't think it's just a direct thing. I remember for me when I was a young boy, because I started really following the Lord when I was about 10, 11 years old. And so it was like a journey then already. And I remember one of the silliest little things that was so meaningful to me is we stayed on the mountainside in Fishhook. And I used to love playing cricket in the garden, and I would lose tennis balls like all over, like literally in the mountain, in the bush. And eventually I had no more tennis balls left, and I would do this often. I would go walking in the mountain, and I'd just pray and say, Lord, show me where a ball is, because I really want to play cricket, and I don't have a ball. And he would literally tell me, like, go look under that bush, and I'd find a ball. It's such a silly little thing, but it showed so many things. It's like, yes, you can hear my voice. Yes, I care about your life and the things you care about. And it's like, you can trust me and you can be confident in hearing my voice. And so it's like, I think sometimes that's a really small step, because there's no the danger involved is maybe a snake or a scorpion. There's no danger in that. It's actually just God, like, just expressing his love and fun. But there are times where it's a little bit more, there's risk. And those times I think really build you, and the risk, and then there's like a...
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It reminds me of it's essentially a relationship you're building. I think it was...
strange, eh?
Yeah, crazy. No, but like I remember having a conversation with David Handyside, I think it was, who said this. I might be wrong on that, but I think it was David Handyside was talking about how like trust is earned, and how do you come to get to a place where you can trust a person. It's like, well, you trust them.
Yeah.
And then if the trust is misplaced, then you don't do that again. Yeah. But when the trust is well placed, and then you trust them more.
Yeah.
And then you trust them more, and then you trust them more, and then you trust them more, and the more you learn their character, the more you trust them. Yeah. And that's like the basis of getting to know someone.
Like Ham actually says that in a different way. I mean, it means the same thing, but I love how he puts it. He says trust is given. Mm-hmm. So yes, I get the earning is over time, like the more and more. But every time you've got to give a little bit of trust, and it could backfire royally.
Trust is given and earned.
Trust is given and then earned, like over time.
Yeah.
Like
I love that. Yeah. Write that down. Put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah. Make T-shirts. But it's true though, because you can't trust if you don't give it. And I think that's where people who have been hurt often find themselves stuck, is because they're like, I'm not going to trust. Well, then you're never going to learn trust again. You've got to get to a place of healing where you can actually give that trust again and give it. And it may backfire. But that's a beautiful thing about if your relationship is primarily with God first and then with other people, if you've got that righteousness, justice thing, right? Because then he will prove his trustworthiness. He will prove it over and over. And I loved, Jane quoted this verse on Sunday when she was talking about the intimacy of the bride and the bridegroom, Jesus and the church. And she used that phrase of, I've never seen a righteous man begging for bread.
Yeah.
Like that is a challenging phrase but it's so true. I've seen so many righteous people who their testimony is just, it might be, it's been struggle, it's been tough, it's been, we've had this hardship, but God has been faithful. And what makes a person righteous? Faith. So it's so true. You've got to put it into practice. You've got to give God the chance to disappoint you.
It's really challenging because, like if I look at my life, if I look at my testimony, there is not one example of God ever letting me down, to the point that it's crazy. But there has been places that I haven't trusted God, that I have had experienced like really terrible consequences for, and then blamed God for, and thought it was his fault. But there is not an area that I haven't submitted to God and trusted him in that I have been let down in ever.
Yeah.
When I think about it.
Yeah, but that's all of those are because you heard God's voice.
Yeah.
You heard God's voice, so you were responding to what he said. But I think we all have examples where it looked like God let us down, but actually he never said. It was our, we come with our stuff and our particular idea or our solution or our plan, and then we kind of like want God to rubber stamp it, and then, and sometimes these can be big decisions that, and then people come back 5 years later and their life's a mess because they made this huge life choice. They married someone they never should, I'm just using like the really big examples where they've moved somewhere and it's like everything was just turned to a mess, and it's like, well, did God ever say? And when you ask them that question, because oftentimes then people are in a space where they're angry with God and they're like ready to, they're just fighting with God.
Exactly, it's crazy.
But if you ask that question, did God say? You'll find people will be like, they'll be stumped because, well, I don't know that God really said. It was this circumstantial, it was that. And here's the thing about that's so important. It's such a good thing to learn. Like I love that passage in Isaiah, I think it's in chapter 26, where it says that the just shall live. It says the just shall live by faith. It's not the Haggai one, but it says the corner. It's about the cornerstone. Sorry, it says those who trust in the cornerstone will never be put to shame, is how the Bible translates it often. But the phrase there actually means will never be in haste. So if you hearing God's voice, you never have to rush. It's always those rush decisions. It's always those like, I have to do this or whatever. And it's like, no, just slow down. Take time to hear God and hear what he says. But usually that rushing is a sign that I have an agenda of something I'm pushing.
Yeah.
And it's fleshly, and then it does backfire, and we can get ourselves into such a mess. I mean, I've been there as well.
Yeah.
I'm so angry with God.
The amount of times I've blamed God for all the areas in my life that I haven't trusted him in.
Yeah.
It's laughable in hindsight, and yet I keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we all grow like to the point like Abraham where we just tune into his voice.
I figure, I mean,
yeah.
I like to think about the example of like, in terms of hearing God's voice and trusting him. If a stranger came and called me in the middle of a busy room, I wouldn't hear their voice at all because they're a stranger. But like, for instance, if Martyn called me from downstairs, which he does often because I work here.
But then you don't hear me anyway because you've got massive
headphones
on, so I've got to literally like yell.
This is true, but I know what his voice sounds like, because I've heard it many times, and I'm in relationship with him to the point that I'm tuned into the tonality of his voice. I can recognize if two people speak, I can tell which one's Martyn. If I were to just listen to the audio of this recording, I would know when I'm speaking and when Martyn's speaking, because I know what he sounds like, because I'm in relationship with him. I know him. I know his tonality. I know the nuances of his voice. And he can say strange things to me, and I'll understand it because I also know his character, because I've learned his character. And I think about that with God, like in order to fully trust his voice and his character, I need to spend enough time with him to understand what his voice sounds like, and I guess his character when he says something to me, and his heart when he tells me to do something, what his heart is for it.
Yeah.
And that only happens through quality time, spending time getting to know him, I guess.
Yeah, that's so good, Ryan. I think that's actually a good place to just land, because I think that's just a really good definition of all of those things, like hearing his voice, the journey, the time it takes to build relationship. So wherever someone's at, it's like, well, just press into God, press into relationship with him. One of the best places to do that is in community. I mean, you can do it outside of community, and you have to also, like, you've got to have your own quiet space, and like, but it's really hard to do it in the quiet space if you're not doing it in community. So you've got to have both. So I think that's really what I feel the Lord is saying, is like, just really, really press in to hear my voice, become so tuned to my voice that it literally, if God was to like go, you'd be like, God went,
Yeah.
Like, and you know what it, like you say, you know almost what he means. He's like, maybe that's the nudge that I didn't listen to the last time. So
I mean, I guess if you ever really want to know somebody, I there's people who brag and say they've done this and done that, but if you ever really want to know a person, you don't listen to what. It's not about listening to what they say. You first. It's like a character check. You like listen. Like there's reputation actually means something. Like if you look at the people around that person and who they're in relationship with, and the fruit of the relationship that person has with people. If you look at that person's relationships, you can actually garner an idea of character a lot of the time when summing up a person. If I look at a person and they're all of their relationships are a mess, I'm probably gonna go in with a bit of a guard up in terms of interacting with that person. If there's just if they leave a trail of destruction, relational destruction. But if I meet a person and the people around that person are their lives are all better for that person being in them, and they all have close relationship, and there's like fruit of their relationship with that person that comes up in the conversation. It's like the biggest relational green flag.
Yeah,
and so I think it's the same with God. Like if we want to get to know him, we can get to know him by what he says, but we can also get to know him through his reputation. Like you go into a place of community, these are all individuals in relationship with God, and what do they say about him? Like what are their experiences of him? And if we're living witnesses, like our testimony is our personal experience of him, and like my personal experience of God is like highly recommend.
5 stars.
Yeah. And the church is the body is like the church is a place that of broken people who have all had encounters with God and had their lives transformed through being in relationship with him. That's a pretty big green flag. So I think it's like huge to understand the character of God, to be around his people who have been impacted by him and been transformed by him.
Yeah, and can witness to that, can actually have a testimony. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was cool.
That was cool.
Unplanned chat.
Yeah.
Unplanned.
Spontaneous experiment that was quite fun.
That was ready, but I mean, that was actually related to something else. But yeah, maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, that was actually fun and not so bad. I was quite stressed about the whole thing, but
I think Esther's in the
wasn't
podcast.
Too hard actually. It was quite fun.
Is Esther in the podcast? I think maybe she is.
Esther cameo.
Okay, cool. Do we have to do like pleasantries of like
subscribe, hit the thumbnail on the bell with the notification to get more, and bring it out, and then invite your friends and tell them about Jesus, and then make them go to church.
Yeah, that's it.
And what to subscribe and like
everything he said.
Yeah,
we kind of like opposites. Like I'm wearing black, you're wearing white. I wonder if it's like
this is coordinated.
Yeah. because you have a darkest tone of skin, so the white